Portuguese. In today's Em Bom Português, we're going to be talking just a little bit about one of the most complicated grammatical features in Portuguese. A lot of the time, grammar rules are not hard yes or no, this is right or this is wrong. There's always some level of overlap between the two, where people know something is not technically the correct way of saying it, but they say it anyway, and what have you. This is especially the case when it comes to the placement of pronouns in Portuguese, which is very easily the most complicated point of Portuguese grammar. The grammars that we reference can either be prescriptive or descriptive. If they're prescriptive, that means that they are saying how the grammar should function and the rules that that grammar should follow. If they're descriptive, they're describing the way that people talk, making note of the patterns and rules that people follow when they're talking. Most modern grammars are a little bit of a combination between the two, being prescriptive in the sense that they make note of how we should be using our grammar and how the grammar works, but also being descriptive in the sense of how people actually talk and some of the changes that that might mean with regard to the norm. Portuguese is undergoing a shift in the use and placement of its pronouns, and this is happening in different ways in Portugal and Brazil. When we talk about pronoun placement, we're talking about where words like me, te, u, go when they're in relation to things that have been previously referenced. Things like how we would say in European Portuguese, dá-me aquela coisa, or in Brazilian Portuguese, me dá aquela coisa. You can see the difference right there in what is considered the norm in both varieties of Portuguese. And when it comes to pronoun placement, there are two main patterns that Portuguese follows. In European Portuguese, pronouns go after the verb unless there's another word that attracts them to in front of the verb. This is called enclise in Portuguese. However, in Brazilian Portuguese, the opposite is true. The overwhelming majority of grammars of reference for Brazilian Portuguese recognize that in Brazil, próclise is the default. However, many Brazilian grammars still prescribe enclise as the default position, despite the fact that no one talks that way in Brazil. Only the most formal of written communications in Brazilian Portuguese tends to follow enclise. However, with that in mind, in Brazil, knowing that formally enclise is the preferred position, many Brazilians overcorrect and use enclise when it's either not necessary or not grammatical. This is a phenomenon that's called hyper or ultra correction and is most often associated with speakers who are using a grammatical rule that is either less common or less well known. In Portuguese, there are a bunch of different classes of words that attract the pronoun to the front of the verb. I don't have enough time to get into what all of those are, so I am going to be focusing on prepositions. Now, when we look at a construction like para fazê-lo, no one will blink an eye because it's a construction that is said everywhere, whether that's Portugal or Brazil. But is it correct though? Let's take a look at the grammar. Most prepositions in Portuguese tend to follow a certain grammatical logic when we look at how they attract the pronouns. And in the case of prepositions, except for a, próclise is the obligatory position. However, of all of the classes of words that attract the pronoun to the front, the prepositions are the weakest at attracting them. In many cases, and perfectly legitimately, speakers will drop the próclise in favor of enclise because it sounds better. This is exactly what happens when we say para fazê-lo. The technical grammatical preference here should be para o fazer, because para is a preposition that attracts próclise. However, for many speakers, the enclise in this case sounds better, so Portuguese people speaking out loud will often say para fazê-lo, because there is a Portuguese tendency of always placing the pronouns at the end. This is a similar case to Brazilians who will say and write para fazê-lo because it's easier to say phonetically than para o fazer. There's less confusion among all of the sounds. The grammatical rule in any case is that prepositions such as para require the use of próclise in Portuguese, so we should be saying para o fazer, para te dar informação, and not para fazê-lo or para dar-te informação. What does that mean then if so many people say para fazê-lo? It means that when we're talking out loud and we're not talking in formal registers, it's perfectly acceptable to say para fazê-lo. However, when we're writing something that requires a little bit more attention to the details, we should keep in mind that prepositions require próclise, therefore leaving us with para o fazer. And that's all I got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, if you learned something or if you otherwise found it interesting, give me a thumbs up down below. If you're not already, you might think about subscribing to my channel so that you don't miss a video. I make videos about food, culture, and the Portuguese language, which you can find in playlists in the eye above, and I will see you next time.